Me and my partner are happy and in love, but we're constantly disagreeing with each other and fighting. And we can't seem to agree on anything. Help.
Help.
It's great. And you're coming to us.
Right?
So clearly we know what we're doing.
We know what we're doing. Okay, let's roll the dice.
You're just going to use it for everything.
Yeah, it's my new kid Steph's catchphrase now.
I love it. So this is super common, obviously, right?
Mm-hmm.
Disagreeing and like the back and forth of never agreeing on the same thing and always kind of being at odds with each other, even though you're in a relationship and you love each other. And I think that's super common.
Yeah.
We do it all the time still, and we kind of get stuck in that loop. I think it comes from this perspective of being a little kid and feeling like you were never seen, never heard, never valued, what you thought, what you felt, all of those things being kind of disregarded. And then as you grow up, you need to continually fight to be seen and heard and validated. And then that plays out in your relationship with always needing to be right.
Yeah.
Always needing your partner to see you and see that you're right and see that you're worthy and see that what you have to bring to the table. And so that becomes the battle that the both of you are stuck in, where you're trying to get the other person to see you, to see your worth, to see your value, which that's the way that we are loved, right? You have to be seen in order to be loved. So I'm going to fight to be seen, and I'm going to fight to show you that I'm worthy of your love by proving that I'm right about everything. And it's a really chaotic, toxic loop that can kind of spiral and ruin relationships, where you can eventually see relationships break down because each partner is constantly trying to be right, as opposed to recognizing at some point, hopefully, what, babe? That they're both right.
They're both right.
Like,
And
that's such a trippy thing to think about.
the fact is that there is very little that you actually have to come to the same agreement on.
Yeah.
There are a few things in a relationship where you absolutely like need an agreement on,
Mhm.
but most of it you don't have to be in agreement on.
You don't
get
have to be on the same page.
Right? You get to have your opinions and perspectives, each of you, and you're both right.
Yes.
Like very little actually causes a destruction when you don't agree on it, except for when you make it.
Right. Except for when you're willing to, or when you're unwilling to acknowledge that you can both be right.
Right.
And it's a hard concept to grasp at first. Like, it takes a while.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, I mean, really, it's the beginning of like awareness that everybody has a perspective. Everybody has
An experience
that they've lived that
Mhm.
shapes their perspective and shapes how they see the world and how
Mhm.
they feel about things. And your partner is the same. So when you can start to see that and have compassion for it, then that's like when the door opens up into all sorts of other wonderful, beautiful, amazing things, because you start to have compassion for that person, for your partner,
Yes.
of what is their experience really like.
Mhm.
Oh, I get to get curious about why do they actually think that, you know, this is the right way to do something, rather than judge it as the wrong way. And now I need to
Right.
prove it. Look, I'm really curious. Why do you feel that
Mhm.
way? Why are you so passionate about this? I'm curious
Like,
about that.
what does it feel like for you? What is it bringing up in you?
Yeah,
Like, let's hear this. I want to understand.
exactly.
Like, I want to understand.
Like, I agree that
as
that's
the-
totally right.
Right.
You know, you see it that way. That's awesome. I don't see it that way, but
Right.
I'll explain myself, but I'm curious. You know, why
Yeah.
do you see it that way? Why do you feel that way about whatever this
Right.
disagreement is about? And then just getting really open to hearing what that is.
Mhm.
And not like, don't hear it so that you can pick it apart and argue about it.
Right.
Sure. Sure, you're right.
Yeah. Okay.
You're totally right.
Yeah.
Tell me why you're
Right
right.
again.
And then the whole time you're like, wrong.
Right. That's
wrong,
not.
wrong. And then let me explain to you why you're wrong.
Right.
I just heard why you think you're right, but let me tell you why
Right.
you're wrong. Right. That's a thing that often happens, and we still do that sometimes too. But you just have to listen with compassion and hear their version of life.
Mhm. And that also doesn't mean that you have to then agree with them.
Exactly.
Like, being open to that is like still being open to yourself, being open to changing your perspective and allowing your perspective to change. But like, they get to have their perspective and you still get to have yours. And it's not a agree to disagree, like you said. It's just like, oh, that's what it feels like for you. That's your perspective. And that is absolutely true.
Yeah.
My perspective is this. And that is absolutely true.
Yeah. It feels so differently when you start doing it. It's hard at first, and then it just becomes this beautiful thing of like, oh, suddenly we're not fighting anymore. We're just learning about each other.
Yeah.
Like, what does your life look like from over there? You know, if I was in your eyes looking out, what's it going to feel like? What's it going to look like? And it becomes this really beautiful opportunity to connect rather than the disconnect that happens when you're trying to constantly prove to each other that you're right.
Right.
All of that, like, continual back and forth fighting and arguing, even when it's playful. You know what I mean?
those sly, like, haha.
Yeah. And that's
Being
oftentimes, I
playful
think, how
here.
it starts.
Uh-huh.
And then it just like metastasizes. Maybe that's not the right word, but it just
No, I think that's actually probably a pretty accurate word for how toxic it can
over
get.
time, it just starts to build into this toxicity in your relationship that is so destructive. So you can stop it. You know,
Right.
you can consciously stop it by just getting curious about what is their life like through their lenses, through their perspective, and like coming to the and maybe because you said earlier that like there are a few things that you have to agree upon. Maybe this is one of them. Like you have to agree that you're both right.
That you're both right.
You have to agree
Yeah.
that both of your views and your perspectives and your thoughts matter and that they're both valuable. If you can't agree that they're both right, at least agree that they're both valuable.
They're both valuable. There you go.
Right.
And that they're true to the other person.
Yeah, that
Whether
they
or not
both
they're
have-
true to you,
they
they're
both
true
have
to the other
worth.
person.
Right.
Yeah.
And so if you can respect that and then just get curious about that, eventually you'll probably get to the point where you're like, oh, they're right. They're just right from their perspective and I'm right from mine.
Right. I also want to bring just like attention just a little bit more, even though this wasn't in the question, I feel like it's important and I just want to throw it out there that like really emphasizing on the fact that both perspectives. And that means that if you are in a dynamic where somebody is like demanding that they're always right, but you are always like, oh, you are right and I am wrong, and not trusting yourself, and never like if the other person is always right in your mind as well, like we got to look at that. There's some unhealthy things there too. And so when we're talking about both perspectives being right and true and accurate for that person, we are talking about it coming from a healthy place.
Right.
But if they're like, I'm always right and you're always wrong, not with those words, but for like that manipulation that can come in, that's another topic to look at. Your perspective is right, even if they don't agree with it. So really like trusting yourself, but not demanding that your truth be forced on anybody else.
Yeah. It gets to just be yours.
Yeah.
And your partner gets to have theirs.